That certainly is the big question, whether or not the Fed should, not if they will. We don't expect the Fed to actually take any policy change this week. But when we look at the conditions of the U.S. economy, we do see very clearly that there's weakness bubbling underneath the surface. Inflation has been disappointingly low. Business investment has slowed along with business confidence. We see manufacturing take a hit. And this all is compiling on top of expectations that growth is noticeably slowed in the second quarter relative to the start of the year. So I do think it's going to be increasingly difficult for members of the committee to continue to ignore the need for further policy accommodation, at least in the coming months.
So Lindsey, what has changed? I remember over the course of the past maybe 9 months or so, this idea that we had been seeing some ideas or some data points that might be pointing to a slowdown, not just in the U.S. economy, but globally as well. But why is it right now that we are paying so much more attention to it? And why is it right now that the markets are really wanting to have a Fed interest rate cut?
Well, I think there's a loss of confidence. I think all of a sudden market participants are beginning to focus not on the expectation for things could be better, but they're focusing on the realized data points that we're seeing released. And again, as we look at inflation, when we look at top-line GDP, manufacturing, business investment, even spending, even on the consumer side, yes, we did see a stronger than expected retail sales report, but we're still seeing ongoing volatility at the very least in the consumer sector. And taken together, this does not bode well for the expectation for perpetuating this recovery indefinitely. So I do think that finally market participants and Fed members alike are beginning to wake up and focusing on the actual data as opposed to unfounded expectations.
What exactly does the inflation front tell us about what's going on with the economy? Because right now we are seeing the consumer may be able to pay higher prices. At the same time, prices aren't really going that much higher. Is there really an inflation worry at this stage?
No, I don't think there is an inflation concern at this point. And in fact, when you look at some of the comments from Fed officials, they're increasingly focused on this idea of a disinflationary or a slower pace of positive inflation in the economy. And in fact, we've heard from a number of Fed members outline the scenarios that would potentially warrant a rate cut in the coming months, many of them pointing to a slow level of inflation around 1.5%, which is actually the level of inflation that we're currently seeing in the economy. So in essence, reading between the lines, they're acknowledging that the current conditions that we see in the economy vis-a-vis inflation do in fact warrant a rate reduction in the near term, sooner rather than later.